long before the pyramids pierced the azure sky, or the first pharaoh's name was etched into enduring stone, the ancient Egyptians in the cradle of civilization along the fertile ribbon of the Nile grappled with the profound mystery of creation. Their earliest cosmologies, particularly those emerging from the venerable city of Unu, later known to the Greeks as Heliopolis, spoke not of a sudden burst of light, but of a slow, deliberate emergence from an unending, formless void. This was Nun, the primordial waters, a boundless, dark, and silent abyss that stretched infinitely in every direction. Imagine a world without form, without sound, without even the faintest glimmer of light, only the gentle, eternal lapping of an unseen, unmoving ocean. This was the state before existence, a realm of pure potential, pregnant with all that would ever be. From this watery expanse, the first stirrings of consciousness began. It was not a violent upheaval, but a gradual awakening, like a dream coalescing into reality. From within Nun, the self-created god Atum arose. He was the first being, born of his own will, and in some traditions, he was said to have emerged upon a primeval mound, the Benben, which rose from the receding waters, much like the fertile land would emerge from the annual inundation of the Nile. This Benben became a sacred symbol, representing the very first land, the original point of creation, and it would later inspire the obelisks and the capstones of pyramids. Atum was alone in this vast, silent universe, and his existence was a solitary one. He yearned for companionship, for the world to be filled with life and purpose. The method of Atum's creation of the first deities is a fascinating and somewhat intimate detail often debated by scholars. Some texts suggest he masturbated, bringing forth the first pair of gods through this act of self-generation. Other interpretations speak of him sneezing or spitting them out. These seemingly crude descriptions, however, held deep symbolic meaning for the Egyptians. They represented creation through sheer will and bodily emanation, a powerful and direct form of bringing forth life from one's own essence. From Atum's solitary act came Shu, the god of air, and Tefnut, the goddess of moisture. Shu, with his outstretched arms, would forever hold the sky apart from the earth, creating the space for life to flourish. Tefnut, the gentle dew and refreshing rain, brought the vital element of water to sustain all things. Together, they represented the fundamental elements necessary for existence, the air to breathe and the moisture to nourish. But the vastness of Nun still surrounded them, and the world was far from complete. Shu and Tefnut, adventurous and curious, wandered off into the primordial darkness, losing themselves in the endless expanse of Nun. Atum, filled with a deep love for his children, was distraught. He sent his eye, the all-seeing eye of Ra, to search for them. When his eye finally returned, bringing Shu and Tefnut back to him, Atum wept tears of joy, and from these tears, it is said, humanity was born. This origin story imbues humanity with a divine connection, born from the very emotions of the Creator God. It also establishes the Eye of Ra as a powerful entity in its own right, often personified as a goddess, capable of both destruction and protection. With Shu and Tefnut safely returned, the creation continued. They, in turn, coupled and gave birth to Geb, the earth god, and Nut, the sky goddess. Geb lay prostrate, forming the solid ground beneath our feet, while Nut arched her starry body above him, forming the celestial canopy. Imagine Nut's body, a shimmering expanse of deep blue, adorned with countless stars, her limbs stretching to touch the horizon, forever separated from her beloved Geb by their father, Shu, who held her aloft. This separation, though painful for Geb and Nut, was essential for the world to have space, for light to penetrate, and for life to thrive between the earth and the sky. This cosmic embrace, eternally reaching but never quite touching, speaks to the inherent order and balance that the Egyptians perceived in the universe. From the union of Geb and Nut came the final 4 members of the Ennead, the great company of 9 gods who formed the core of the Heliopolitan cosmology. These were Osiris, Isis, Set, and Nephthys. Osiris, the benevolent king, would later become the god of the underworld and resurrection, embodying the cycle of life, death, and rebirth. Isis, his devoted sister and wife, was the great mother goddess, mistress of magic, healing, and protection. Set, their volatile brother, represented chaos, storms, and the desert, a necessary counterpoint to order and fertility. And Nephthys, Set's sister and wife, often seen as a protective, funerary goddess, completed this crucial quartet. These 9 deities, Batum, Shu, Tefnut, Geb, Nut, Osiris, Isis, Set, and Nephthys, form the fundamental structure of the cosmos, each with their distinct roles and relationships, laying the groundwork for all subsequent myths and religious practices. It's worth noting that while the Heliopolitan creation myth, centered around Atum and the Ennead, was highly influential, it wasn't the only one. Other cities and religious centers had their own versions of creation, sometimes featuring different primordial gods or different methods of bringing the world into being. For instance, in Memphis, the god Ptah was seen as the creator, not through physical emanation, but through thought and speech. He conceived the world in his heart and then brought it into existence by speaking its name. This intellectual creation, rather than a physical one, highlights the diversity and richness of ancient Egyptian theological thought. Historians still debate the extent to which these different cosmologies coexisted peacefully or competed for dominance. It's likely that they were seen as complementary rather than contradictory, different facets of the same profound truth, much like different regional dialects of a language. The concept of Ma'at, cosmic order and balance, was intrinsically linked to these creation myths. The very act of creation was the establishment of Ma'at out of the chaos of none. Every sunrise, every annual flood of the Nile, every birth was a reaffirmation of this divine order. The pharaoh, as the living embodiment of Horus, was responsible for maintaining Ma'at on earth, ensuring the prosperity of the land and the well-being of its people. This wasn't merely a philosophical concept, it was a practical framework for life, guiding everything from law to agriculture. The Egyptians believed that if Ma'at was disrupted, chaos would return, and the world might even revert to the primordial state of none. The sun god, Ra, though often conflated with Atum in later periods as Atum-Ra, also held a pivotal role in the ongoing creation and sustenance of the world. Ra was the life-giving force, traversing the sky in his solar bark, bringing light and warmth to the land. His daily journey was a metaphor for life itself, from birth at dawn to death at dusk. And his nightly journey through the underworld was a perilous passage of regeneration, ensuring his rebirth each morning. This cyclical view of time, deeply rooted in the natural rhythms of the Nile and the sun, permeated all aspects of Egyptian belief. Perhaps these daily cycles, the constant rising and setting of the sun, the predictable inundation of the river, whispered stories of creation and renewal to the ancient Egyptians, reinforcing their belief in an ordered, divinely sustained universe. The earliest evidence of these creation myths can be found in texts like the Pyramid texts, dating back to the Old Kingdom, circa 2400 to 2300 BCE, inscribed on the walls of pharaohs' tombs. These texts were not narratives in the modern sense, but rather spells and utterances intended to ensure the deceased king's successful journey to the afterlife and his eternal union with the gods. Within these spells are fragments and allusions to the primordial state, the emergence of a tomb, and the creation of the Ennead, demonstrating the antiquity and foundational nature of these beliefs. The very act of carving these sacred words into stone was an act of preserving the divine order, a way to anchor the ephemeral human existence to the eternal cosmic dance. Even the architecture of their temples echoed these creation narratives. The temple was often seen as a microcosm of the universe, with its sanctuary representing the primeval mound, the Ben, where creation first occurred. The columns, often carved to resemble papyrus stalks or lotus blossoms, evoked the lush, fertile landscape that emerged from the waters of Nun. The ceilings, painted with stars and celestial bodies, depicted Nut, the sky goddess, stretching above. Walking through a temple was, in a sense, walking through the very act of creation, a journey from the chaotic outer world to the ordered, sacred heart of existence. The enduring power of these myths lies not just in their narrative appeal, but in their ability to provide meaning and structure to a world that was both bountiful and unpredictable. They explain the origins of the gods, the existence of humanity, the cycles of nature, and the fundamental balance between order and chaos. They offered comfort in the face of death and promised renewal. The story of creation was not a static event, but an ongoing process, continually reaffirmed by the sun's journey, the river's flow, and the rituals performed by priests and pharaohs. It was a living, breathing cosmology that shaped every aspect of ancient Egyptian life, from their grand monuments to their daily prayers. The very air they breathed, the water they drank, the ground they walked upon, all were imbued with the essence of this divine genesis. If you're enjoying this, liking and subscribing truly helps and is much appreciated. From the swirling mists of Nun, where creation itself was merely a whisper, emerged the first true architect of the cosmos, Ra. He was the sun, not merely a disk in the sky, but the very essence of light and life, the self-created one who spoke the world into being. Imagine the vast, silent void, broken only by the hum of nascent energy, and then a sudden, blinding brilliance as Ra, in his myriad forms, willed himself into existence. He was Khepri, the scarab beetle, pushing the sun across the dawn sky. He was Ra, the midday sun, blazing in full glory. And he was Atum, the setting sun, descending into the underworld to be reborn. This triune nature spoke to the cyclical rhythm of existence that would permeate all of Egyptian thought. Ra, alone in the boundless expanse, felt the stirring of creation within him. From his own essence, through a sneeze or a cough, depending on the ancient telling, he brought forth the first divine couple, Shu and Tefnut. Shu, the god of air, was the breath that filled the emptiness, the very space between things. His name, perhaps, echoed the sound of a sigh or a gentle breeze. Tefnut, his twin sister and consort, embodied moisture, the dew, the rain, the life-giving waters that would eventually nourish the earth. Their forms were often depicted with lion heads, hinting at a primal, untamed power, yet their nature was fundamental to balance. Shu held the sky aloft, preventing it from collapsing onto the earth, while Tefnut brought the essential humidity that allowed life to flourish. Yet, even in this nascent divine family, the seeds of discord were sown. Shu and Tefnut, in their exploration of the vast, formless waters of Nun, became lost. Ra, in his immense sorrow and concern, sent his eye, sometimes depicted as a goddess, sometimes as a fiery entity, to search for them. When his eye returned, bringing his beloved children back, Ra wept tears of joy, and from these divine tears, it is said, humanity was born. This origin story, found in texts like the Coffin texts and the Pyramid texts, dating back to the Old Kingdom, circa 2686 to 2181 BCE, establishes a profound connection between the gods and humankind, suggesting that we are literally born from divine emotion. It also introduces the concept of the Eye of Ra, a powerful, independent entity that would later play a significant role in myths of divine retribution and protection. With Shu and Tefnut established, the next generation of gods emerged from their union, Geb and Nut. Geb was the earth, the solid ground beneath our feet, the fertile soil from which all life springs. Nut was the sky, the vast, arching canopy above, studded with stars, often depicted as a woman bending over the earth, her body forming the celestial dome. Their love was immediate and all-encompassing, a deep, primal embrace. They clung to each other, so intertwined that no space existed between them. This passionate union, however, created a problem. There was no room for anything else to exist, no space for the world to unfold, no distinction between heaven and earth. Ra, observing this perpetual embrace, understood that order required separation. He commanded Shu, the god of air, to lift Nut away from Geb. This act, depicted vividly in tomb paintings and temple reliefs, is one of the most iconic images in Egyptian mythology. Shu, with arms outstretched, pushes Nut upwards, creating the vast expanse of the sky, while Geb lies below, forever yearning for his beloved. This separation, though painful, was necessary for the cosmos to take shape. It established the fundamental structure of the world, the earth below, the sky above, and the air between them, allowing for the emergence of light, life, and space. It's a powerful metaphor for the creation of boundaries and the establishment of a defined, ordered universe from a chaotic, undifferentiated state. Despite their separation, Geb and Nut managed to conceive 4 children who would become some of the most pivotal deities in the Egyptian Pantheon: Osiris, Isis, Set, and Nephthys, and in some traditions, a 5th child, Horus the Elder, is also included. This birth was not without its challenges. Ra, in his wisdom or perhaps his jealousy, had decreed that Nut could not give birth on any day of the year. Thoth, the god of wisdom and writing, known for his cunning and intellect, intervened. He gambled with the moon god, Khonsu, winning 5 extra days from the moon's light. These 5 epigomenal days, added to the 360-day calendar, became the days on which Nut could safely deliver her children, thus circumventing Ra's decree. This lesser-known detail highlights Thoth's cleverness and his role as a divine mediator, and also explains the origin of the 5 extra days at the end of the Egyptian calendar year, which were considered particularly sacred and often associated with the birth of these powerful gods. The birth of these children marked the beginning of a new era, one fraught with both creation and conflict. Osiris, the eldest, was destined to become the first king of Egypt, a benevolent ruler who brought civilization, agriculture, and law to humanity. Isis, his sister and consort, was the epitome of magic, motherhood, and loyalty, a powerful sorceress whose wisdom rivaled Thoth's. Set, the third child, represented chaos, storms, and the desert, a formidable and often destructive force. And Nephthys, the youngest, was the goddess of mourning, protection, and the unseen, often associated with the boundaries between life and death. The relationships between these four would define much of the subsequent mythological narrative, particularly the enduring conflict between order, represented by Osiris and Isis, and chaos, represented by Set. The establishment of cosmic order was not a static event, but an ongoing process, a delicate balance maintained by the gods. Ra, as the supreme deity, continued his daily journey across the sky in his solar bark, illuminating the world by day and traversing the perilous underworld by night, battling the serpent of chaos, Apep, to ensure the sun's rebirth each morning. Shu continued to hold Nut aloft, preventing the sky from falling. Geb remained the earth, providing sustenance. This intricate cosmic machinery, set in motion by Ra, was both a physical and a spiritual reality for the Egyptians. They believed that their rituals, their reverence for the gods, and the pharaoh's adherence to Ma'at, the principle of truth, justice, and cosmic order, were essential to maintaining this delicate balance. If Ma'at was disturbed, chaos, or Isfet, would inevitably ensue. Historians still disagree whether the early Egyptian pantheon developed organically from local cults that later merged, or if there was a more centralized, deliberate theological construction during the formative years of the Old Kingdom. Some scholars argue that the prominence of Ra, particularly during the 4th and 5th dynasties, circa 2613 to 2345 BCE, suggests a top-down imposition of a solar theology, perhaps linked to the growing power of the pharaohs who claimed direct descent from Ra. Others contend that the diverse origins of deities like Ptah, Memphis, Amun, and Ra, Heliopolis, point to a more syncretic process where different regional beliefs gradually coalesced, with dominant gods absorbing aspects of lesser ones. This debate highlights the fluidity of religious belief in ancient Egypt and the difficulty of reconstructing a definitive original pantheon. What is clear, however, is that by the time of the Old Kingdom, the Heliopolitan Ennead, the group of 9 gods, starting with Atum, Ra, and including Shu, Tefnut, Geb, Nut, Osiris, Isis, Set, and Nephthys, had become a dominant theological framework, providing a coherent narrative for creation and the divine lineage. The early reigns of these gods were not without their challenges. Even with cosmic order established, the world was still young and raw. Ra as the first kin. God faced rebellions from humanity, who in some accounts grew insolent and disrespectful. This led to the myth of the destruction of mankind, where Ra, in his anger, sent his eye, transformed into the fierce lioness goddess Sekhmet, to punish humanity. Sekhmet, reveling in the slaughter, almost annihilated all of mankind, before Ra, filled with remorse, tricked her by flooding the land with beer dyed red to resemble blood, causing her to drink it and fall into a drunken slumber, thus saving the remnants of humanity. This myth, found in the Book of the Heavenly Cow, reflects the immense power of the gods and the precariousness of human existence in their eyes, but also Ra's ultimate compassion and desire for balance. The conflicts among the gods themselves also shaped the cosmos. While the most famous divine conflict would later involve Set and Osiris, the early period was marked by the establishment of boundaries and roles. Shu and Tefnut, as the air and moisture, were essential for the very breath of life, Yet their initial loss underscored the fragility of the nascent world. Geb and Nut's passionate embrace, though beautiful, had to be severed for creation to proceed, a bittersweet necessity. These divine struggles, often depicted as dramatic narratives, were not merely stories. They were explanations for the fundamental aspects of the world. Why the sky is above the earth, why there is air to breathe, why the sun rises and sets. They provided a framework for understanding the universe, imbuing every natural phenomenon with divine intention and personality. Perhaps these early gods, as they navigated their newly formed cosmos, whispered stories to the stars, shaping the constellations with their very thoughts. The vastness of the heavens, the solidity of the earth, the unseen currents of the air, all were extensions of their divine bodies and their intricate relationships. The establishment of cosmic order was a monumental task, a dance between creation and separation, love and necessity. It laid the groundwork for the intricate tapestry of Egyptian mythology, where every god, every act, and every conflict contributed to the grand, cyclical narrative of existence, death, and rebirth. The stage was set for the dramatic tales of kingship, betrayal, and resurrection that would define the next epoch of divine rule. But it was in these foundational moments, with Ra's tears and Shu's mighty lift, that the very fabric of the universe was woven. The sun, a fiery orb, dipped below the western desert, painting the sky in hues of deep violet and fading rose, as if mourning a loss yet to come. In the fertile lands along the Nile, where life bloomed in vibrant greens, lived Osiris, the benevolent king who had brought civilization to the world. He taught humanity the secrets of agriculture, how to cultivate the golden grain from the earth, and how to press the rich juice from the vine. He showed them the ways of justice and the beauty of music, lifting them from a primitive existence. His reign was a golden age, a time of peace and prosperity, and his people adored him. By his side ruled his beloved sister wife, Isis, a goddess of profound wisdom and potent magic, whose love for Osiris was as boundless as the desert sky. But beneath this serene surface, a shadow stirred. Seth, Osiris's younger brother, seethed with envy. He was the god of the desert, of storms, and of chaos, wild and untamed, a stark contrast to Osiris's ordered reign. Seth craved the throne, the adoration, the very essence of his brother's being. His heart, a barren landscape, plodded in the darkness, nurturing a bitter seed of resentment that grew into a monstrous tree of treachery. One day, Seth devised a cunning plan, cloaked in the guise of a grand feast. He commissioned a magnificent, intricately carved chest, fashioned from the finest wood and adorned with precious metals, designed to perfectly fit the dimensions of Osiris. At the lavish banquet, amidst the laughter and the flowing wine, Seth presented the chest, declaring it a gift for anyone who could fit within its exquisite confines. One by one, the guests, eager for such a prize, attempted to lie within it. But none could. Some were too tall, others too short, their limbs spilling over the edges, or their bodies unable to touch the ends. Finally, with a feigned casualness, Seth invited Osiris to try. Unsuspecting, and perhaps amused by the game, Osiris lay down within the chest. The moment he settled, fitting perfectly as if it were made for him alone, Seth and his 72 co-conspirators, who were in on the dark secret, slammed the lid shut. They sealed it with molten lead, trapping the unsuspecting king within his beautiful prison. The air, once filled with merriment, was now thick with a chilling silence. The conspirators, with a terrible purpose, carried the sealed sarcophagus to the Nile's edge. They cast it into the sacred river, abandoning it to the currents, hoping it would be carried away and forgotten, along with their heinous crime. The Nile, usually a source of life, became a silent accomplice to death, bearing the weight of a king's betrayal. This act, according to texts like the Pyramid texts, which date back to the Old Kingdom, CSA 2686 to 2181 BCE, marked a profound shift, introducing the concept of death and the afterlife into the cosmic order. News of the atrocity reached Isis, tearing through her heart like a desert storm. Her grief was immeasurable, a wail that echoed across the land. But Isis was not one to succumb to despair. Her love for Osiris was an unyielding force, a beacon in the encroaching darkness. She immediately set out on a desperate quest to find her husband's body, her determination burning brighter than any star. She wandered across the land, her tears mingling with the dust, asking every person, every animal, every plant she encountered if they had seen the chest. Her loyal sister, Nephthys, who despite being Seth's wife, was horrified by his actions and joined Isis in her sorrowful search. The currents of the Nile had carried the chest far, eventually washing it ashore at Byblos, a distant Phoenician city. There, a magnificent tamarisk tree, drawn by the divine essence within, grew up around the sarcophagus, encasing it within its trunk. The tree grew so large and beautiful that the king of Byblos, Malcander, admired it greatly and had it cut down to serve as a pillar in his palace. This detail of the tree growing around Osiris, is one of those lesser-known elements that adds a layer of natural wonder and divine intervention to the myth. Isis, guided by divine intuition and the whispers of the wind, eventually arrived in Byblos. She found work as a nursemaid to the queen's son, subtly revealing her divine nature through her gentle touch and the faint glow that sometimes emanated from her. One night, the queen discovered Isis attempting to imbue her child with immortality by placing him in a fire. Though the queen was terrified and angry, Isis revealed her true identity and the purpose of her journey. The king and queen, awed and humbled, led her to the great pillar in their palace. With their permission, Isis carefully extracted the chest from the heart of the tamarisk tree, a task of immense power and precision. She then returned to Egypt, bearing the sacred chest, her heart a mixture of sorrow and profound relief. Back in Egypt, in a secluded marsh, Isis began the arduous task of preparing Osiris for burial. She used her powerful magic, chanting ancient spells, to breathe a flicker of life back into his form. It was during this sacred ritual, through a miraculous act of resurrection and divine conception, that she conceived their son, Horus. This moment, often depicted as Isis hovering over Osiris, is central to the myth, ensuring the continuation of the royal line and setting the stage for future vengeance. However, the tragedy was far from over. Seth, ever vigilant and consumed by his paranoia, learned that Osiris's body had been recovered. In a fit of uncontrollable rage and malice, he found the chest and, in a final act of desecration, dismembered Osiris's body into 14 pieces. He scattered these fragments across the length and breadth of Egypt, hoping to obliterate any chance of his brother's return and to prevent any claim to the throne. The pyramid texts, again, describe the scattering of Osiris's body as a deliberate act of chaos and destruction. Once more, Isis was plunged into the depths of despair, but her resolve remained unbroken. With the aid of Nephthys and the jackal-headed god Anubis, who would later become the god of embalming and the dead, she embarked on another painstaking search. They traversed the land, from the delta marshes to the southern deserts, painstakingly gathering each scattered piece of Osiris. Each discovery was a moment of profound sorrow and determined hope. One piece, his phallus, was said to have been swallowed by a fish in the Nile, and so Isis fashioned a replacement from clay and magic. Once all the pieces were collected, Isis, with her formidable magical prowess, meticulously reassembled Osiris's body. She then performed the very first mummification ritual, wrapping his limbs in linen bandages, chanting incantations, and anointing him with sacred oils. This act, born of love and necessity, laid the foundation for the elaborate funerary practices that would define ancient Egyptian civilization for millennia. Through her magic, Osiris was not fully restored to earthly life, but he became the ruler of the Duat, the Underworld, the Lord of the Dead, ensuring passage for all souls into the afterlife. He became a symbol of resurrection and eternal life, a promise that death was not an end, but a transformation. Meanwhile, in the quiet seclusion of the delta marshes, Isis raised her son, Horus, in secret, protecting him from the ever-present danger of Seth. Horus grew into a strong and valiant youth, his heart burning with a desire to avenge his father's murder and reclaim his rightful inheritance. The story of Horus's upbringing, his vulnerability, and Isis's fierce protection often involves her healing him from scorpion stings and other dangers, further emphasizing her role as a protective mother and powerful sorceress. When Horus came of age, he emerged from the shadows to challenge Seth for the throne of Egypt. This began a long and arduous struggle, a cosmic battle between order and chaos, between rightful succession and usurpation. The conflict between Horus and Seth is one of the most enduring and frequently depicted narratives in Egyptian mythology, often referred to as the contendings of Horus and Seth. It wasn't a single battle, but a series of trials, contests, and legal disputes brought before the Ennead, the Council of the Gods, led by Ra. The gods, assembled in their divine court, listened to the arguments of both contenders. Seth, powerful and cunning, argued that he was the stronger god, the one capable of ruling Egypt with an iron fist. He pointed to his strength, his mastery over storms and the desert. Horus, representing justice and divine order, presented his claim as the legitimate heir of Osiris. The debates were often fierce and protracted. Historians still disagree whether the protracted nature of these divine trials reflects actual legal disputes in ancient Egypt, or if they are simply a narrative device to heighten the drama and emphasize the complexity of divine justice. Some scholars suggest that the lengthy deliberations reflect the ancient Egyptian emphasis on Ma'at, the cosmic principle of truth, justice, and balance, which required careful consideration before a verdict could be reached. During these trials, both Horus and Seth engaged in various contests, some physical, others magical, and some even rather conical. In one instance, Seth challenged Horus to a boat race, but insisted they use boats made of stone. Horus, being clever, fashioned a boat out of wood and disguised it to look like stone, winning the race easily. In another, Seth attempted to sexually assault Horus, a dark and disturbing act intended to humiliate and defile him, thereby making him unfit to rule. However, Isis intervened, collecting Horus's semen and tricking Seth into ingesting it, thus asserting Horus's dominance and purity. This particular episode, while graphic, underscores the profound power dynamics and the lengths to which Seth would go to undermine Horus. The gods were often divided. Some, like Ra, initially favored Seth, believing his raw power was necessary to control the wild forces of the world. Others, like Thoth, the god of wisdom and writing, consistently sided with Horus, advocating for the principle of rightful succession and the restoration of Ma'at. The arguments went on for 80 years, a testament to the profound significance of the outcome for the cosmic order. Ultimately, after much deliberation and intervention from Isis, who sometimes used her magic to trick or persuade the gods, the Ennead finally ruled in favor of Horus. They recognized his legitimate claim as the son of Osiris and the rightful heir to the throne. Horus was crowned king of Egypt, bringing an end to the long period of chaos and restoring order to the land. His reign ushered in a new era of peace and stability, mirroring the golden age of his father. Seth, defeated but not destroyed, was banished to the desert, his domain, where he continued to represent the wild, untamed forces of nature, forever a counterpoint to the ordered world of the Nile. Some traditions suggest he later became a benevolent companion to Ra, protecting the sun god's boat from the serpent Apep, thus finding a new, albeit less glorious, role in the cosmic balance. This evolution of Seth's role highlights the nuanced nature of Egyptian deities, who were not always purely good or evil, but represented complex aspects of the world. The myth of Osiris, Isis, and Horus is more than just a story. It is the foundational narrative of ancient Egyptian civilization. It explained the cycle of life, death, and rebirth, the importance of kingship, the concept of divine justice, and the promise of an afterlife. Osiris, as the first king to die and be resurrected, became the prototype for all deceased pharaohs, ensuring their passage to the Duat. Isis became the ultimate mother goddess, a symbol of unwavering love, protection, and the powerful magic, revered by all. Horus, the triumphant sun, embodied the living king, the protector of Egypt, and the upholder of Ma'at. The story was etched into temple walls, sung in hymns, and whispered in homes, a timeless testament to the enduring power of love, justice, and the eternal cycle of existence along the life-giving Nile. The desert winds, which had carried the whispers of creation and the echoes of the first gods, now stirred with a different kind of energy, the fervor of a quest for vengeance. Horus, the falcon-headed god, born of Osiris and Isis, had grown to maturity, his heart burning with the memory of his father's dismemberment and the usurpation of his throne by Seth. From the moment of his miraculous conception and secret birth in the papyrus swamps of Chemis, Isis had shielded him, nurturing him not just with milk, but with stories of his rightful heritage and the injustice that had befallen his family. She taught him the ways of the world, the constellations that wheeled above, and the names of the plants that offered both sustenance and healing. But most importantly, she instilled in him the unwavering purpose of reclaiming what was his. The time for hiding was over. Horus, now a powerful young god, stepped forth from the shadows of his upbringing, ready to confront his uncle. This was no mere family quarrel. It was a cosmic struggle for order, for the very balance of Ma'at. The divine tribunal, presided over by Ra himself, along with other prominent deities like Thoth, the god of wisdom, and Shu, the god of air, was convened to decide the rightful heir to Osiris's throne. The proceedings were long and often tumultuous, stretching over many years, perhaps even decades in divine time. Seth, ever the boisterous and cunning adversary, presented his case with characteristic bravado, emphasizing his strength and his role in protecting Ra from Apep, the serpent of chaos. He argued that his might was necessary to rule, while Horus, he claimed, was merely a child, untested and unworthy. Horus, guided by the wisdom of his mother and the counsel of Thoth, presented his own claims, rooted in divine lineage and the principle of legitimate succession. He was Osiris's son, the rightful heir, born to restore order. The gods debated, their voices echoing across the celestial halls. Some, like Ra, initially favored Seth, swayed by his power and his past deeds. Others, like Thoth, championed Horus, recognizing the importance of divine law and the restoration of Ma'at. This period of divine judgment, often depicted in texts like the contendings of Horus and Seth, is rich with dramatic encounters and magical contests. In one instance, Seth challenged Horus to a boat race, but with a twist. They were to build boats of stone. Horus, clever and resourceful, fashioned his boat from wood, then covered it with plaster to resemble stone. Seth, in his arrogance, carved a boat from a mountain peak, only for it to sink immediately. Such tales illustrate the differing natures of the two gods. Seth, brute force and impulsiveness. Horus, intelligence and strategic thought. The disputes were not always settled by debate alone. There were physical confrontations, tests of strength and magic. In one particularly vivid episode, Seth, in a fit of rage, gouged out one of Horus's eyes. This eye, the Wedjat eye, became a powerful symbol of protection, healing, and restoration, later often seen on amulets and sarcophagi. Thoth, ever the healer and restorer of order, miraculously healed Horus's eye, emphasizing the divine power to mend what was broken. Another lesser-known detail from these contendings involves Isis's cunning. At one point, disguised as an old woman, she tricked Seth into admitting that a son should inherit his father's property, a statement that inadvertently strengthened Horus's claim. When Seth realized he had been duped, his fury was immense, but the words had been spoken before the tribunal. The protracted nature of these divine trials highlights a significant theological point: the importance of due process, even among the gods. It wasn't simply a matter of power, but of justice and divine decree. Historians still debate the precise theological implications of Ra's initial reluctance to side with Horus. Was it a reflection of an older, more chaotic worldview where might made right, or a deliberate narrative device to emphasize the ultimate triumph of order over chaos, even when that order faced initial resistance from the highest authority? Perhaps it underscored the idea that even divine truth must be argued for, proven, and ultimately accepted by consensus. Ultimately, the wisdom of Thoth and the unwavering advocacy of Isis prevailed. The divine tribunal, after much deliberation and many trials, finally declared Horus the rightful heir to Osiris's throne. Seth was banished, or in some versions, given a new role as the protector of Ra's sunboat, a way to channel his wild energy into a constructive, albeit still challenging, purpose. This judgment was not merely a family resolution. It was the establishment of a fundamental principle for Egyptian civilization: the divine right of kings. Horus, by inheriting his father's throne, became the living embodiment of the pharaoh. Each pharaoh, from the earliest dynasties, was seen as the living Horus, a divine intermediary between the gods and humanity. Upon death, the pharaoh became Osiris, joining the realm of the blessed dead, and his successor became the new living Horus. This cyclical understanding of kingship provided an unbroken chain of divine legitimacy, ensuring stability and order for millennia. The coronation of Horus was a moment of profound cosmic significance. With the Eye of Horus restored, symbolizing wholeness and divine sight, he ascended the throne, not as a conqueror, but as a restorer of Ma'at. The land rejoiced, the Nile flowed abundantly, and the stars seemed to align in celebration. This triumph solidified the concept of the pharaoh as a divine being, chosen by the gods to rule. It meant that the pharaoh was not just a political leader, but a sacred figure, responsible for maintaining cosmic harmony, performing rituals, and ensuring the prosperity of Egypt. The very stability of the two lands, Upper and Lower Egypt, depended on the pharaoh's divine authority. This divine lineage, stemming from Horus's victory, permeated every aspect of Egyptian society. The pharaoh's palace was not just a residence, it was the great house, a sacred space where the divine met the earthly. The rituals performed by the pharaoh were not mere ceremonies. They were essential acts that ensured the sun would rise, the Nile would flood, and the crops would grow. Even the smallest details of pharaonic life, from the wearing of the double crown, symbolizing unity, to the use of specific titles, reinforced this divine connection. The said festival, a jubilee celebrated after 30 years of rule, and then every 3 years thereafter, was a crucial ritual designed to rejuvenate the pharaoh's divine power, ensuring his continued fitness to rule. This festival, with its elaborate processions and symbolic acts, reconfirmed the pharaoh's legitimacy and vitality, a public display of the enduring power of the Horus king. The legacy of Horus's triumph extended far beyond the immediate succession. It provided the theological bedrock for the entire pharaonic system that would endure for over 3,000 years. The conflict with Seth, though violent, was ultimately seen as a necessary crucible through which order was forged from chaos. Seth, the chaotic force, was not entirely vanquished, but contained. His energy redirected, much like the untamed desert was held at bay by the fertile Nile Valley. This nuanced understanding of chaos and order, where one could not exist without the other, was a sophisticated aspect of Egyptian thought. Consider the enduring symbolism. The falcon, sacred to Horus, became an omnipresent emblem of kingship, soaring high above the land, watchful and protective. The eye of Horus, once a symbol of his injury and subsequent healing, transformed into one of the most potent protective amulets in ancient Egypt, worn by both the living and the dead, ensuring wholeness and good health. Even the very concept of justice and truth, Ma'at, was reinforced by this narrative. Horus's victory was a victory for Ma'at, proving that even against overwhelming odds and the machinations of chaos, divine order would ultimately prevail. The story of Horus and Seth was not just a myth, it was a foundational narrative, recited, depicted, and lived. It was etched into temple walls, painted on tomb ceilings, and whispered by mothers to their children. It taught lessons of perseverance, justice, and the enduring power of legitimate succession. It provided comfort in the face of disorder, reminding people that even when chaos seemed to reign, a divine plan was unfolding, and order would inevitably be restored. Perhaps these ancient walls, adorned with the images of Horus and Seth locked in eternal struggle, truly whispered stories to the stars, echoing the timeless battle between light and shadow, order and chaos, a battle that, in the Egyptian worldview, was ultimately always won by the forces of harmony and divine rule. The pharaoh, the living Horus, stood as the perpetual guardian of that harmony, his reign a continuous testament to the triumph of the sun over the usurper and the eternal renewal of the world. As the sun dipped below the western horizon, casting long purple shadows across the desert sands, the journey of the deceased truly began. It was a passage not through physical space, but through the ethereal realms of the Duat, the Egyptian underworld, a shadowy, winding labyrinth fraught with both peril and promise. For the ancient Egyptians, death was not an end, but a transformative threshold, a profound transition from the earthly realm of the living to the eternal landscape of the blessed dead. The preparations for this journey were meticulous, spanning weeks and months, ensuring the body's preservation and the spirit's safe passage. The Duat itself was imagined as a complex, multi-layered realm, often depicted in funerary texts like the Book of Duat or the Book of Gates as a series of 12 caverns or divisions, mirroring the 12 hours of night. Each hour presented unique challenges and encounters, populated by fearsome guardians, benevolent deities, and terrifying creatures. The deceased, guided by spells and incantations inscribed on tomb walls and papyri, had to navigate treacherous waterways, fiery lakes, and gates guarded by monstrous beings. It was a journey of purification and testing, designed to strip away earthly impurities and prepare the soul for its ultimate judgment. Central to this perilous voyage was the role of Anubis, the jackal-headed god, often depicted with dark, watchful eyes. Anubis was the venerable guardian of the necropolis, the overseer of embalming, and the guide of souls through the Duat. His presence was comforting, yet solemn, a constant companion to the newly departed spirit. It was Anubis who traditionally performed the opening of the mouth ceremony on the mummy, a ritual meant to restore the deceased's senses, sight, body and memory, hearing, smell, taste, and speech, so they could partake in offerings and interact in the afterlife. This ancient rite, often depicted in tomb paintings, involved touching various ritual instruments to the mummy's mouth, eyes, and ears, symbolically reanimating the deceased for their eternal existence. As the soul progressed deeper into the Duat, overcoming obstacles and reciting protective spells, it eventually arrived at the Hall of Maat, the pivotal moment of judgment. This was the culmination of the journey, where the deceased's earthly life would be weighed and evaluated. The Hall of Maat was not a place of harsh, punitive judgment, but rather a profound assessment of one's adherence to cosmic order and ethical conduct. Maat, the goddess of truth, justice, and cosmic balance, was often depicted as a woman with an ostrich feather on her head. Her principles permeated every aspect of Egyptian life, from the pharaoh's rule to the humblest farmer's daily interactions. At the heart of the Hall of Maat stood the Great Scales, a divine balance upon which the fate of the soul would be decided. On one side of the scales, Anubis would place the heart of the deceased, believed to be the seat of intellect, emotion, and moral character. On the other side, the feather of Maat was placed, representing truth, righteousness, and cosmic harmony. The tension in this moment would have been palpable, even in the ethereal realm. The heart, having absorbed all the deeds, thoughts, and words of a lifetime, would tremble on the scale, its weight determining the outcome. Standing beside the scales, ready to record the verdict, was Thoth, the ibis-headed god of wisdom, writing, and knowledge. With his scribe's palette and stylus, Thoth meticulously documented the proceedings, his gaze sharp and discerning. He was the divine record-keeper, the arbiter of disputes, and the possessor of secret knowledge. His presence underscored the importance of truth and accuracy in the judgment process. Sometimes the goddess Seshat, Thoth's consort or daughter, also associated with writing and libraries, might be depicted alongside him, further emphasizing the meticulous nature of the divine reco. The outcome of the weighing of the heart was absolute. If the heart was pure, light with good deeds and adherence to Ma'at, it would balance perfectly with the feather. This signified that the deceased had lived a life in accordance with divine order, free from heavy burdens of sin or wrongdoing. Such a soul would be declared true of voice or justified, and welcomed into the presence of Osiris. However, if the heart was heavy with misdeeds, deceit, or injustice, it would tip the scales out of balance. This was a catastrophic outcome. For those whose hearts failed the test, a terrifying fate awaited. Ammit, the devourer of the dead, a monstrous creature with the head of a crocodile, the body of a lion, and the hindquarters of a hippopotamus, lurked beneath the scales. Ammit was not a goddess to be worshipped, but a primal force of annihilation. If the heart was deemed impure, Ammit would instantly devour it, condemning the deceased to a second, permanent death, a complete obliteration of existence, a fate far more terrifying than any physical torment, for it meant the loss of eternal life and identity. This concept of non-existence was the ultimate horror for the ancient Egyptians, who yearned for perpetual being in the field of reeds. For the justified, the journey continued into the blissful presence of Osiris, the supreme ruler of the underworld. Osiris, often depicted with green skin symbolizing rebirth and fertility, wearing the Atef crown and holding the crook and flail, sat enthroned, presiding over the blessed dead. He was the first king to die and be resurrected, making him the ultimate symbol of eternal life and the prototype for every deceased Egyptian. His domain, the field of reeds, Aru, was envisioned as a paradise mirroring the fertile Nile Valley, a place of abundance where the justified would live eternally. Free from toil, hunger, or sorrow, they would sow and harvest, feast, and enjoy the company of other blessed souls and deities, perpetually renewed and joyful. Historians still debate the precise theological implications of the negative confession, or declaration of innocence, that the deceased was expected to recite before the 42 divine judges in the Hall of Ma'at. Prior to the weighing of the heart, this confession, found in chapter 125 of the Book of the Dead, was a long list of affirmations denying various transgressions. I have not stolen, I have not killed, I have not lied, I have not caused pain, I have not polluted the water. Was it a literal confession, a magical incantation, or a statement of idealized moral conduct that the deceased aspired to have lived? Some scholars argue it was a performative act, a ritualistic declaration meant to align the deceased with Ma'at, while others suggest it reflected a genuine ethical code that Egyptians strive to uphold in their daily lives, believing their actions would directly impact their afterlife. The ambiguity perhaps allowed for both interpretations, reflecting the nuanced relationship between human agency and divine judgment. The journey through the Duat, culminating in the judgment before Osiris, was not merely a passive experience. The deceased was an active participant, armed with knowledge from funerary texts. These texts, collectively known as the Books of the Dead, though a more accurate translation is Book of Coming Forth by Day, were not single books, but personalized collections of spells, prayers, and hymns tailored for each individual. They served as guidebooks, maps, and cheat sheets for navigating the afterlife. A lesser-known detail about these texts is that they were often commissioned and custom-made for the deceased, with specific spells chosen based on the individual's status, wealth, and even personal preferences, sometimes even featuring unique illustrations. The quality of the papyrus, the artistry of the hieroglyphs, and the number of spells included varied immensely, reflecting the owner, its earthly means. The belief in this intricate journey and judgment profoundly shaped Egyptian society. It instilled a strong moral framework, encouraging individuals to live justly and ethically, knowing that their actions would ultimately determine their eternal fate. The fear of Ammit, The hope of the field of reeds and the constant presence of Ma'at's principles guided daily life, from the smallest personal interaction to the grandest state affairs. The pharaoh, as the living embodiment of Horus and the upholder of Ma'at on earth, was expected to set the highest example, ensuring cosmic order through his rule, for his own journey through the Duat would be the most significant of all. The very architecture of Egyptian tombs and temples often subtly echoed the journey through the Duat. The progression, from outer courts to inner sanctuaries, from light to darkness, from public to sacred spaces, could be seen as a symbolic representation of the soul's passage from the earthly world to the divine realm. The elaborate decorations, the protective spells carved into stone, and the carefully placed offerings were all part of this grand cosmic drama, ensuring the deceased's successful transition and eternal well-being. Even the daily cycle of the sun was seen as a reflection of this journey. The sun god Ra, in his solar bark, was believed to travel through the sky during the day, bringing light and life to the world. But at sunset, he descended into the Duat, battling the forces of chaos, most notably the serpent Apep, to be reborn each morning in the east. This perpetual cycle of death and rebirth, symbolized by the sun, reinforced the Egyptian belief in an enduring afterlife and the ultimate triumph of order over chaos, light over darkness. The deceased hoped to join Ra in his solar bark, traversing the heavens and participating in this cosmic journey, a privilege reserved for the truly justified. The intricate details of the Duat, the roles of Anubis and Thoth, and the solemn weighing of the heart ceremony before Osiris paint a vivid picture of a civilization deeply attuned to the mysteries of life and death. Their understanding of the afterlife was not a vague hope, but a meticulously planned, highly ritualized journey, demanding both preparation and ethical living. It was a testament to their profound belief in continuity, in the enduring power of the soul, and in a cosmic order that ultimately rewarded truth and righteousness. As the stars began to emerge in the velvet expanse of the night sky, perhaps these ancient souls, having passed their final test, looked down from the field of reeds, content in their eternal peace, their hearts forever light as the feather of Ma'at. The pharaoh, in the eyes of his people, was no mere mortal ruler. He was the living embodiment of Horus, the falcon-headed god, son of Osiris and Isis. This belief was not a metaphor or a poetic flourish. It was a fundamental truth woven into the very fabric of Egyptian existence. From the moment of his coronation, the pharaoh became the divine intermediary, the bridge between the earthly realm and the celestial heavens. His presence was a constant reassurance, a visible manifestation of divine order maintaining cosmic balance, or Ma'at. It was believed that the very prosperity of Egypt, the annual flooding of the Nile, the abundance of harvests, and the protection from foreign invaders, all hinged upon the pharaoh's sacred duties and his intimate connection to the gods. His responsibilities were immense, stretching far beyond the administrative tasks of governing. He was the chief priest of every temple, personally responsible for performing rituals that appeased the deities and ensured their continued benevolence. Though he could not be present at every temple simultaneously, his spirit, his divine essence, was understood to be present in every offering, every prayer. Imagine the weight of such a role, to be the singular point of contact for an entire civilization with the forces that governed the universe. Every sunrise, every sunset, every cycle of the moon was a testament to the pharaoh's successful mediation. The pharaoh's divine kingship was not a static concept. It evolved over millennia. In the earliest dynasties, particularly the Old Kingdom, circa 2686 to 2181 BCE, the pharaoh was seen as a god in his own right, a direct descendant of Ra. The pyramids, those colossal monuments of stone, were not just tombs, but ascension machines, designed to facilitate the pharaoh's journey to the stars to join the gods, ensuring his continued protection over Egypt from the heavens. The sheer scale of these constructions speaks volumes about the reverence and resources dedicated to this divine figure. The Great Pyramid of Giza, built for King Khufu, required an estimated 2.3 million stone blocks, each weighing several tons, a testament to the collective effort driven by this profound belief. Yet as time progressed, particularly by the Middle Kingdom, circa 2055 to 1650 BCE, 2055 to 1650 BCE, the emphasis shifted slightly. While still divine, the pharaoh's role became more nuanced, incorporating elements of a benevolent shepherd, a protector of his people. Texts from this period, like the instruction of Amenemhat I for his son Senuseret I, reveal a pharaoh who grappled with the burdens of kingship, even expressing a sense of isolation. This humanization, however slight, did not diminish his divinity, but perhaps made his connection to the earthly realm feel more tangible, more relatable for his subjects. He was still Horus, but a Horus who understood the trials of his human flock. The symbiotic relationship between gods and mortals permeated every aspect of daily life, far beyond the grand rituals performed by the pharaoh. The gods were not distant, ethereal beings. They were intimately involved in the lives of ordinary Egyptians. Each town, each village, often had a patron deity, a local manifestation of a greater god or a unique, localized spirit. The carpenter might offer a prayer to Ptah, the patron god of craftsmen, before beginning a new project. A woman hoping for fertility might leave an offering at the shrine of Taweret, the hippopotamus goddess of childbirth. The farmer, tending his fields, would invoke Osiris, the god of agriculture and the underworld, for a bountiful harvest. Temples were not just places of worship. They were the dwelling places of the gods on earth. Within their sacred precincts, priests performed daily rituals, feeding and clothing the cult image of the deity, attending to its every need as if it were a living being. These rituals were believed to energize the gods, ensuring their continued active participation in maintaining new cosmic order. The common people, while generally not permitted into the innermost sanctuaries, could bring offerings to the outer courts, seeking divine intervention for personal woes or expressing gratitude for blessings received. Imagine walking through a bustling market, the scent of bread and spices in the air, and then passing by a small, brightly painted shrine where someone kneels, murmuring a prayer, a tangible connection to the divine in the midst of everyday life. One lesser-known detail about this interaction is the practice of oracle questions. During certain periods, particularly the New Kingdom, circa 1550 to 1070 BCE, people would present questions to the cult image of a god, often carried in a sacred bark by priests during a procession. The god would then answer by inclining the bark forward or backward, or by moving it towards one written answer or another. This allowed ordinary people to seek divine guidance on matters ranging from legal disputes to personal dilemmas, offering a direct, albeit interpreted, line to the divine. Historians still debate the exact mechanics of these oracles, whether it was a subtle manipulation by priests, a genuine belief in divine movement, or a combination of both, but their widespread use highlights the pervasive belief in direct divine intervention in human affairs. The gods were also present in the very landscape. The Nile itself was happy, the god of the inundation, whose annual flood brought life and fertility to the land. The desert was the domain of Seth, the chaotic god of storms and disorder, a constant reminder of the forces that threatened Ma'at. The sun, Ra, journeyed across the sky each day, bringing light and warmth, and then descended into the underworld each night, battling the forces of chaos before being reborn at dawn. This cosmic drama played out daily, visible to everyone, reinforcing the idea that the gods were not abstract concepts, but active participants in the world. Even death was a continuation of this symbiotic relationship. The elaborate funerary rituals, the mummification, the provision of grave goods, were all designed to ensure the deceased's successful journey to the afterlife and their eventual transformation into an Akh, a glorified spirit. This transformation allowed them to join the gods and ancestors, from which vantage point they could continue to interact with the living, perhaps even offering protection or assistance. The living, in turn, were expected to perform rituals and offerings for the deceased, ensuring their continued well-being in the afterlife. This reciprocal relationship extended beyond the veil of death, binding generations in a continuous cycle of mutual support between mortals and the divine. The concept of Ma'at, cosmic order and justice, was central to this entire system. The pharaoh's primary duty was to uphold Ma'at, ensuring balance and harmony in both the human and divine realms. When Ma'at was maintained, the gods were content, the Nile flooded, the crops grew, and Egypt prospered. When Ma'at was disturbed through injustice, chaos, or neglect of divine duties, the consequences could be dire: famine, invasion, or internal strife. This belief instilled a profound sense of responsibility in the pharaoh and, by extension, in every Egyptian. Each individual's actions, however small, contributed to the overall balance of Ma'at. A simple act of honesty, a fair dealing in the market, was not just good conduct. It was an act that contributed to the cosmic order, pleasing the gods. Consider the detailed tomb paintings and reliefs. They were not merely decorative, they were functional, designed to ensure the deceased's successful transition to the afterlife and to depict the harmonious interaction between humans, pharaohs, and gods. Scenes of pharaohs offering to deities, of gods bestowing blessings, of daily life unfolding under divine gaze, all served to reinforce this worldview. These images were a constant visual, all sermon, a reminder of the intricate web of relationships that sustained their world. Perhaps these walls whispered stories to the stars, echoing the prayers and hopes of a people deeply connected to their divine protectors. The very architecture of the temples further illustrates this connection. They were built as microcosms of the universe, with the innermost sanctuary representing the primordial mound of creation, where the god first manifested. As one moved from the outer pylons through the courtyards and hypostyle halls, the light would diminish, the ceilings would lower, creating a sense of approaching the sacred, the mysterious heart of the divine presence. The rituals performed within these spaces were not just symbolic. They were believed to be actual interactions. The pharaoh or his appointed priests literally feeding and clothing the divine essence. The enduring power of these beliefs is evident in the continuity of Egyptian civilization for thousands of years. The divine kingship provided a stable framework, a unifying force that transcended regional differences and personal ambitions. Even during periods of political fragmentation, the fundamental concept of the pharaoh as Horus, the upholder of Ma'at, remained largely unchallenged. It was a belief system that provided comfort, meaning, and a clear understanding of one's place in the vast, divinely ordered cosmos. The interaction between gods and mortals was not a distant concept. It was the very breath of life, the rhythm of the Nile, the warmth of the sun, and the promise of eternal rebirth. As the golden light of Ra's sunboat dipped below the western horizon, casting long purple shadows across the desert sands, the ancient Egyptians understood that the day was not truly over. It was merely a prelude to another, far more perilous journey, one that mirrored the very cycles of life and death, creation and destruction that governed their existence. This nightly voyage of Ra through the Duat, the underworld, was not just a celestial event. It was a cosmic battle, a constant struggle to ensure the sun's rebirth and with it, the continued stability of the entire cosmos. Each evening, as the last rays faded, Ra, in his full glory, began his descent into the hidden realm. His boat, the Manjet, transformed into the Mesektet, the boat of millions of years, carrying him through 12 perilous hours, each hour a distinct region of the underworld, populated by both benevolent spirits and terrifying demons. This journey was meticulously documented in texts like the Amduat, or Book of the Hidden Chamber, and the Book of Gates, painted on the walls of royal tombs, guiding the deceased pharaohs and, by extension, all souls through their own nocturnal passage. These texts, dating back to the New Kingdom, around 1550 to 1070 BCE, provided a literal map of the Duat, detailing its inhabitants, its challenges, and the spells required to navigate its treacherous pathways. The primary antagonist in this nightly drama was Apophis, the colossal serpent of chaos, a creature of pure darkness and destruction, whose sole purpose was to swallow the sun and plunge the world into eternal night. Apophis was not merely a physical threat. He embodied Isfet, the principle of chaos and disorder, the antithesis of Ma'at, the cosmic order. Every night, Ra, accompanied by a retinue of protective deities, Set, the god of storms and disorder, paradoxically serving as Ra's fierce defender against Apophis, Thoth, the god of wisdom and magic, who provided protective spells, and even the deceased pharaohs themselves, who, in their afterlife, joined the divine crew, faced this monstrous adversary. The battle against Apophis was never-ending. It was a cycle of triumph and temporary defeat, for Apophis could never be truly destroyed, only subdued. Each morning, as the sun rose anew, it signified Ra's victory, a testament to the enduring power of creation over chaos. Yet, the Egyptians knew that Apophis would gather his strength again, waiting for the next dusk to launch his assault. This cyclical nature of conflict and renewal was deeply ingrained in their worldview. It taught them that even in the face of overwhelming darkness, light would always return, but only through constant vigilance and struggle. This concept of cyclical renewal extended far beyond the sun's journey. It permeated every aspect of Egyptian life and belief. The annual inundation of the Nile, for instance, was seen as a divine act of renewal, bringing fertility and life to the parched land after months of drought. Just as the river receded, leaving behind rich black silt, so too did life emerge from the apparent death of the land. Osiris, the god of the underworld and resurrection, epitomized this cycle. His death at the hands of Set and his subsequent rebirth through the magic of Isis and Nephthys mirrored the agricultural cycle of planting, dying, and sprouting anew. He became the prototype for all deceased, promising them a similar resurrection in the afterlife. The very act of mummification, a practice spanning thousands of years, from the early dynastic periods, around 3100 BCE, through the Roman era, was an elaborate ritual designed to ensure this rebirth. By preserving the body, the Egyptians believed they provided a vessel for the soul, the Ka and Ba, to return to, enabling eternal life. The elaborate tombs, filled with grave goods, spells, and protective amulets, were not merely resting places, but launching pads for the soul's journey through the duat, mimicking Ra's own lightly voyage. The deceased, like Ra, had to navigate dangers, pass judgments, and ultimately emerge victorious into the field of reeds, their version of paradise. Historians still debate the precise theological implications of Apophis's inability to be permanently vanquished. Was it a reflection of the inherent imperfection of the world? A recognition that chaos, though contained, could never be entirely eradicated? Or did it serve a more profound purpose, providing the necessary friction against which creation could define itself? A perpetual challenge that ensured the gods and humanity remained active participants in maintaining Ma'at. Perhaps Apophis, in his destructive role, was an unwitting catalyst for the sun's daily renewal, a dark mirror reflecting the brilliance of Ra. This constant struggle, rather than a sign of weakness, might have been seen as the very engine of cosmic existence, preventing stagnation and ensuring dynamic balance. Even the pharaohs, in their earthly rule, were seen as participants in this grand cosmic drama. They were the living embodiment of Horus, the son of Osiris, and therefore the earthly representative of order and stability. Their rituals, their temple building, and their very existence were acts of maintaining Ma'at, ensuring the Nile's flood, the sun's rise, and the defeat of chaos. When a pharaoh died, the succession was not just a political transition, but a cosmic one, ensuring the continuous flow of divine authority and the perpetuation of order. The new pharaoh immediately took on the mantle of Horus, ready to continue the eternal struggle against the forces of disorder, just as Ra continued his nightly battle against Apophis. Consider the meticulous astronomical observations made by the Egyptians, particularly those related to the heliacal rising of Sirius, the brightest star in their sky. Its reappearance just before dawn, after a period of invisibility, coincided almost perfectly with the annual flooding of the Nile. This celestial event, celebrated as the bringing of the new year, was not merely a practical marker for agriculture, but a profound symbol of cosmic renewal. Sirius, or Sopdet as they called her, was often associated with Isis, the goddess of magic and motherhood, further linking the star's return to themes of rebirth and fertility. This deep connection between the celestial movements and earthly events reinforced their belief in an interconnected universe, where every cycle, from the smallest seed to the grandest star, mirrored the eternal dance of creation and destruction. Lesser-known details often illuminate these grand themes. For instance, some funerary spells mention the deceased needing to repel the serpent, or cut off the head of Apophis, indicating that even ordinary individuals in their afterlife journey were expected to play a role in this cosmic struggle. It wasn't just Ra and the gods who fought chaos. Every soul was a potential warrior for Ma'at, contributing to the universal balance. This belief empowered individuals, giving their afterlife journey a profound purpose beyond mere personal salvation. Their successful passage through the duat was a small, yet significant, victory for order in the face of ever-present chaos. The very architecture of their temples and tombs also reflected these cycles. The progression from the brightly lit courtyards to the increasingly dark and intimate sanctuaries mirrored the sun's journey from the visible world into the hidden depths of the duat. The pylons of the temples, often depicting the pharaoh smiting his enemies, were not just political statements, but symbolic acts of repelling chaos, much like Set repelled Apophis on Ra's behalf. The hypostyle halls, with their dense columns, evoked a primeval swamp, the very first moments of creation from the watery chaos of Nun, a constant reminder of the world's emergence from disorder. The Egyptians' understanding of time was also cyclical, not linear. While the why recognized the passage of years, their primary focus was on the eternal recurrence of events. The sun's daily path, the moon's monthly phases, the Nile's annual flood, the pharaoh's perpetual rule, and the soul's endless journey. This cyclical view fostered a sense of stability and reassurance. No matter how dire the circumstances, the sun would rise again, the Nile would flood again, and life would find a way to renew itself. This profound optimism, born from a deep understanding of natural and cosmic rhythms, allowed them to face the uncertainties of life and death with a remarkable sense of calm and purpose. Perhaps these ancient walls, adorned with their vibrant depictions of gods and demons, pharaohs and souls, whispered stories not just to those who entered their sacred spaces, but to the very stars above. They spoke of a universe in constant motion, a delicate balance maintained by divine struggle and human endeavor. They told of the courage to face the darkness, the faith in the promise of dawn, and the enduring power of creation to emerge, time and again, from the very jaws of destruction. The legacy of their beliefs continues to echo through time, a testament to a civilization that found profound meaning in the eternal dance between light and shadow, order and chaos, life and its inevitable yet always temporary end. Beyond the grand narratives of Ra, Osiris, and Isis, beyond the cosmic dance of the Ennead and the Ogdoad, lay a vibrant, intricate tapestry woven from countless threads of belief, each representing a deity, a spirit, or a sacred force revered in a particular corner of Egypt. The formal state religion, centered on the great gods, provided a unifying framework, yet the true heart of Egyptian spirituality beat in the local cults, in the intimate relationship between a community and its specific divine protectors. These lesser deities, often rooted in ancient totemic beliefs or the personification of natural phenomena, formed the bedrock of daily religious life, their presence felt in the rustle of the papyrus, the fertile flood of the Nile, or the warmth of the sun on a mud brick wall. Consider the sheer diversity. There were gods of specific towns, like Sobek, the crocodile god, whose primary cult center was at Kom Ombo and the Fayum, where the fertile waters of the Nile and its associated lakes teemed with his fearsome brethren. Here, he was not merely a distant deity, but a palpable presence, both feared and revered, embodying the power and danger of the waters that sustained life. His priests would even keep live crocodiles in temple pools, adorned with jewels, as living manifestations of the god. In contrast, further south, in the arid lands near the First Cataract, the ram-headed god Khnum reigned supreme, particularly at Elephantine. Khnum was seen as the divine potter who molded humanity on his potter's wheel from the clay of the Nile. His domain was the source of the inundation, the very lifeblood of Egypt, and his worship reflected the profound gratitude and dependence on the annual flood. These local gods often possessed animal forms or characteristics, a legacy of pre-dynastic times when specific animals were likely seen as embodying particular divine qualities or spirits. Bastet, the graceful cat goddess, was originally a fierce lioness deity, much like Sekhmet, but her cult softened over time, becoming associated with protection, fertility, music, and joy, particularly at her cult center of Bubastis in the Delta. Her festivals were renowned for their lively, joyous atmosphere, a stark contrast to the solemn rituals performed for some of the more formidable state gods. Similarly, Thoth, while a major deity associated with wisdom and writing, was deeply revered in his cult center of Hermopolis, where he often appeared as an ibis or a baboon, animals associated with intelligence and the moon. The integration of these myriad local cults into the broader mythological framework was a gradual, organic process. As Egypt unified and as dynasties rose and fell, the dominant theology often sought to incorporate these regional deities, either by identifying them with aspects of the major gods or by assigning them specific roles within the cosmic order. For example, many local sun gods were syncretized with Ra, becoming Amun-Ra, Sobek-Ra, or even Ra-Horakti, demonstrating the pervasive influence of the solar cult. This process of syncretism allowed for a flexible and inclusive religious system, where local traditions could persist while still acknowledging the overarching authority of the state pantheon. Lesser-known protective spirits also held significant sway in the daily lives of Egyptians. Taweret, the hippopotamus goddess, with her swollen belly and pendulous breasts, was a fierce protector of pregnant women and childbirth. Her benevolent yet formidable image was a common sight on amulets and household shrines, embodying the hope for safe delivery and healthy offspring. Bes, a dwarf deity with a grotesque, leonine face, was another beloved household god, warding off evil spirits, snakes, and nightmares. Unlike most Egyptian deities, Bes was often depicted full face rather than in profile, emphasizing his direct, confrontational nature against malevolent forces. His image frequently adorned beds, headrests, and even cosmetic containers, underscoring his role in personal protection and domestic well-being. These were not gods of grand temples and state rituals, but rather intimate protectors, whose presence brought comfort and reassurance to the common people. The sheer number of these localized deities and spirits meant that the Egyptian pantheon was never truly closed. New gods could emerge, or existing ones could gain prominence in specific contexts. Consider the relatively obscure god Shed, often depicted as a young prince who was a protector against dangerous animals, particularly snakes. His popularity surged during the New Kingdom, perhaps reflecting a heightened concern for personal safety in a period of increased travel and interaction with foreign lands. He was often invoked by hunters and travelers, offering a localized form of divine intervention against very real, tangible threats. Historians still disagree whether the vast proliferation of these local deities represented a polytheistic system with a hierarchical structure, or if it was more akin to a monotheistic underlying force manifesting in countless forms. Some scholars argue that while many gods existed, there was an underlying belief in a singular divine essence, with each deity representing a facet of this ultimate power. Others contend that the Egyptians were truly polytheistic, with each god possessing distinct agency and power within their specific domain. The truth likely lies somewhere in between, a fluid system where the lines between distinct deities and manifestations of a greater force were often blurred, reflecting the nuanced and adaptable nature of Egyptian thought. The cults of these local deities were not merely passive acts of worship. They were vibrant, active communities. Priests and priestesses served these specific gods, maintaining their temples, performing daily rituals, and interpreting their will. Festivals for these local deities were often the highlight of the year for the common people, providing opportunities for communal celebration, feasting, and direct engagement with the divine. The Opet festival, for instance, while involving the state god Amun-Ra, also saw the procession of his consort Mut and their son Khonsu from Karnak to Luxor, a journey that brought the gods closer to the people, reinforcing their connection to the divine. Even the deceased had their own specific protective deities. Serket, the scorpion goddess, was invoked for protection against venomous bites and was one of the 4 goddesses who guarded the canopic jars containing the internal organs of the deceased. Her presence in tombs underscored the Egyptians' deep concern for protection, even in the afterlife, highlighting the pervasive nature of divine guardianship. Another fascinating, if less prominent deity was Heka, the deification of magic itself. Heka was not merely a god who used magic, but the very embodiment of the creative and persuasive power of speech and ritual. He was present at creation, a primal force, and was invoked by magicians and priests to ensure the efficacy of their spells and rituals. His cult was never widespread in the same way as, say, Ra or Osiris, but his conceptual importance permeated every aspect of Egyptian religious practice, from temple rituals to funerary rites. The daily interaction with these localized gods and spirits shaped the Egyptian worldview in profound ways. The river, the desert, the fertile land, each was imbued with divine presence. The very act of farming, fishing, or crafting was often accompanied by prayers or offerings to the specific deities associated with those activities. For a farmer, Renutet, the cobra goddess of the harvest and good fortune, was paramount, ensuring the success of their crops and the abundance of their granaries. For a craftsman, Ptah, the creator god of Memphis, was the patron of artisans, inspiring skill and creativity. This pervasive sense of divine presence meant that the sacred Wa, as not confined to grand temples, but was woven into the very fabric of everyday life, a constant reminder of the interconnectedness of the human and divine realms. The legacy of these lesser deities and local cults is immense, offering a more complete picture of Egyptian religious life than focusing solely on the major state gods. They demonstrate the remarkable adaptability and resilience of Egyptian belief, capable of integrating diverse regional traditions into a cohesive yet multifaceted spiritual system. These were the gods who listened to the whispered prayers of individuals, who protected homes and families, and who ensured the continuous rhythm of life in the fertile valley. Their stories, often less grand than those of the cosmic deities, are nonetheless vital threads in the rich, vibrant tapestry of ancient Egyptian mythology, revealing a world where every corner, every creature, and every human endeavor was touched by the divine. As the sun dipped below the western horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and violet, the ancient Egyptians turned their thoughts not only to the earthly realm, but to the unseen forces that shaped their lives and the journey that awaited them beyond the veil of existence. For them, the world was imbued with Heka, a potent, magical force, a divine energy woven into the very fabric of creation. This wasn't magic as a parlor trick, but a fundamental power present in the gods, in the spoken word, in the rituals performed by priests and pharaohs, and even in the everyday objects that offered protection and solace. Heka was the underlying principle that allowed the gods to create, to sustain, and to transform. It was the energy that could be harnessed to heal, to protect, to curse, or to ensure a prosperous afterlife. Priests, deeply versed in sacred texts and intricate rituals, were the primary conduits of Heka. They understood the specific incantations, the precise gestures, and the appropriate offerings needed to invoke divine favor or to ward off malevolent spirits. Their knowledge was passed down through generations, often guarded within temple precincts, where the air itself seemed to hum with ancient power. Even the pharaoh, seen as a living god, was the ultimate master of Heka, his pronouncements and actions believed to directly influence the well-being of the two lands. When he performed the daily temple rites, offering incense to the gods or pouring libations, he was not merely observing a tradition. He was actively engaging with and directing Heka for the benefit of his people and the cosmic order. One of the most profound manifestations of Heka and its pervasive influence was in the elaborate preparations for the afterlife, a journey they believed every soul must undertake. Death was not an end, but a transition, a doorway to another existence. The Field of Reeds, a paradise mirroring the earthly Nile Valley, but perfect and eternal. To navigate this perilous journey successfully, the deceased needed not only a well-preserved body, but also a wealth of magical protection and guidance. This belief fueled the meticulous and costly practice of mummification, a process that evolved over millennia. Early attempts, dating back to the pre-dynastic period, c.d. 6000 to 3100 BCE, involved simply burying bodies in the hot, dry desert sand, which naturally desiccated them. But as their understanding of the afterlife deepened, so too did their methods. By the New Kingdom, c.d. 1550 to 1070 BCE, mummification had become an art and a science, taking up to 70 days. The brain was often removed through the nostrils. The internal organs, lungs, liver, stomach, and intestines, carefully extracted, treated, and preserved, and placed in canopic jars, each protected by one of the four sons of Horus. The heart, believed to be the seat of intellect and emotion, was usually left in place, as it would be weighed against the feather of Ma'at in the Hall of Two Truths. The body was then packed with natron salt for about 40 days to thoroughly dry it out, before being meticulously wrapped in hundreds of yards of linen bandages, often interspersed with protective amulets. These amulets were small, potent objects, each imbued with specific Heka to protect the deceased. The scarab beetle, symbolizing rebirth and the rising sun, was perhaps the most ubiquitous, often placed over the heart, sometimes inscribed with a spell from the Book of the Dead. It was meant to prevent the heart from testifying against the deceased during judgment. The Ankh, the symbol of life, ensured continued existence. The Ujat Eye, or Eye of Horus, offered protection and healing. The Jed pillar, representing stability and the backbone of Osiris, symbolized endurance and resurrection. Even the materials used for these amulets held significance. Carnelian for life, lapis lazuli for truth, gold for divinity and eternity. Beyond the physical preservation and the protection, the charms. The spiritual journey was guided by funerary texts, most famously the collection of spells known as the Book of the Dead. This was not a single book, but a compilation of individualized spells, incantations, prayers, and hymns, tailored for each person, written on papyrus scrolls or linen shrouds and placed within the tomb. These spells were essentially a guidebook for the deceased, providing the knowledge and words needed to overcome obstacles, to identify with gods, to pass through dangerous gates, and to navigate the judgment of Osiris. For example, spell 125, the negative confession, was crucial. Here, the deceased would declare their innocence before a panel of 42 divine judges, reciting a list of transgressions they had not committed, such as, "I have not stolen, I have not killed, I have not told lies." This elaborate ritual of confession and judgment highlights the Egyptian emphasis on ethical conduct in life as a prerequisite for a blessed afterlife. The tomb itself was a microcosm of the universe, a carefully constructed space designed to ensure the deceased's eternal well-being. Its walls were often adorned with vibrant paintings and intricate reliefs depicting scenes from the deceased's life, offerings to the gods, and vignettes from the afterlife journey. These images were not merely decorative. They were believed to be magically potent, allowing the deceased to partake in the depicted activities eternally. Food offerings, placed in the tomb, were magically consumed by the Ka, life force, and Ba, personality soul of the deceased, ensuring their sustenance. Even the furniture, jewelry, and personal items buried with the dead were intended for their use in the afterlife, reflecting a belief that the next world was a continuation, albeit perfected, of this one. One lesser-known detail about funerary practices is the role of the opening of the mouth ceremony. This ritual, performed on the mummy and its coffin or statue, was crucial for restoring the deceased's senses: sight, hearing, smell, taste, and the ability to speak. Using special tools, priests would touch various parts of the mummy's face, symbolically opening the mouth and eyes, enabling the deceased to eat, drink, breathe, and interact in the afterlife. Without this ceremony, the Egyptians believed, the deceased would remain mute and senseless, unable to enjoy the bounties of the field of reeds. This ritual underscores the profound belief that the physical body, even in death, was essential for the soul's continued existence and enjoyment. Beyond the grand scale of royal burials, magic and ritual permeated the lives of ordinary Egyptians. Amulets were worn by the living for protection against illness, evil spirits, and misfortune. Charms were recited for safe childbirth, successful harvests, or to ensure fidelity. Dreams were often interpreted as messages from the gods or the deceased, and dream interpretation was a recognized practice. Even simple acts, like pouring a libation to ancestors before a meal, were imbued with a sense of sacred connection and respect for the unseen forces. The home itself was often protected by small figurines of household deities like Bes, the dwarf god of childbirth and protector of the family, and Taweret, the hippopotamus goddess of fertility and safe delivery. However, the precise nature of the Egyptian afterlife and the mechanics of the soul's journey remain a subject of scholarly dispute, while the Book of the Dead provides numerous spells and descriptions. Historians and Egyptologists still debate the exact sequence of events the soul was believed to encounter, or whether different social classes had different expectations for their post-mortem existence. Did the wealthy and powerful truly have a better chance of reaching the field of reeds due to their elaborate tombs and extensive funerary provisions? Or was the judgment of Osiris ultimately based solely on one's moral conduct, regardless of earthly status? Some scholars argue that the elaborate rituals were primarily for the elite, while others suggest that even the humblest Egyptian, with a simple burial and a few protective spells, held the same hope for eternal bliss. The texts themselves can be contradictory or vague, reflecting perhaps regional variations in belief or evolving theological concepts over thousands of years. The concept of Heka also extended to the realm of medicine. Ancient Egyptian physicians, renowned throughout the ancient world, combined empirical observation and practical remedies with magical incantations and amulets. A doctor treating a broken bone might set it and apply bandages, but also recite a spell to invoke the healing power of a god like Sekhmet or Isis. Illness was often attributed to malevolent spirits or divine displeasure, and thus magical remedies were seen as equally, if not more, important than physical ones. The Edwin Smith Papyrus, c. 1600 BCE, a medical text focusing on surgery and trauma, shows a remarkably rational approach to injuries. Yet other texts reveal a strong reliance on charms and incantations for various ailments. This blending of the practical and the magical was characteristic of the Egyptian worldview, where the two were not separate but intertwined aspects of reality. The Egyptians' profound connection to the natural world also informed their magical beliefs. The annual inundation of the Nile, the predictable cycle of the sun, the rebirth of vegetation, all were seen as evidence of divine power and Heka at work. The gods themselves were often personifications of natural forces, and their actions were believed to directly influence the world. Rituals performed in temples, such as the daily offering to the cult statue of a god, were not just acts of worship, but active participation in maintaining cosmic order, preventing chaos, Isfet, from overwhelming the divine order, Ma'at. These daily rites, performed in the dim light of temple sanctuaries, with the scent of incense heavy in the air, were believed to literally recharge the gods and ensure the continued prosperity of Egypt. Perhaps these walls, adorned with their vibrant depictions of gods and pharaohs, whispered stories of Heka to the stars, echoing the incantations that once filled their halls. Perhaps the very dust within the ancient tombs still holds the echoes of the prayers and hopes of those who sought eternal life. The Egyptian understanding of magic was not about defying natural laws, but about aligning with and harnessing the inherent divine power that animated the universe. It was a belief system that provided comfort in the face of the unknown, hope in the promise of rebirth, and a profound sense of connection to the divine forces that governed their world, from the rising of the sun to the eternal journey of the soul. Their legacy, etched in stone and papyrus, continues to speak of a people who lived deeply, believed profoundly, and prepared meticulously for a tomorrow that stretched far beyond the confines of earthly life. The echoes of ancient Egyptian mythology, once whispered along the Nile and carved into the enduring stone of temples, did not fade with the shifting sands of time. Instead, they traveled across continents and centuries, weaving themselves into the very fabric of human expression, shaping art, architecture, and literature in ways both subtle and profound. Even today, the figures of Osiris, Isis, and Ra, the intricate dance of life, death, and rebirth, continue to captivate and inspire, a testament to the enduring power of these ancient narratives. Consider, for instance, the pervasive influence on Western art. From the Renaissance onwards, European artists, fascinated by classical antiquity, often drew inspiration from Egyptian motifs, even if their understanding was sometimes filtered through Greek and Roman interpretations. The obelisk, a symbol of solar worship and divine power, was transported from Egypt to Rome by emperors like Augustus and Caligula, and later, during the Baroque era, became a popular architectural element in European cities, adorning piazzas and marking significant sites. Bernini's elephant carrying an obelisk in Rome's Piazza della Minerva is a whimsical yet direct homage to this ancient form, a blend of Egyptian grandeur and European artistic flair. This architectural borrowing wasn't merely aesthetic. It was an appropriation of perceived power and timelessness, linking new empires to the majesty of the pharaohs. The allure of the afterlife, so central to Egyptian belief, also found its way into later artistic expressions. The concept of judgment, the weighing of the heart against the feather of Ma'at, resonated with Abrahamic traditions, albeit with different theological frameworks. While direct visual parallels are less common in early Christian art, the underlying themes of moral accountability and a spiritual journey after death certainly share a conceptual lineage. Later, during the Romantic era of the 19th century, Artists and writers, drawn to the exotic and the sublime, rediscovered Egypt with a fervent passion. The discovery of the Rosetta Stone in 1799 and the subsequent decipherment of hieroglyphs by Jean-François Champollion in the 1820s opened the floodgate of knowledge, revealing the full complexity of Egyptian thought and myth. This period saw a surge in Egyptomania, with Egyptian motifs appearing in furniture, jewelry, and even fashion, a clear demonstration of how newly accessible historical information could ignite widespread cultural trends. In literature, the influence is equally pervasive. The journey of the deceased through the Duat, encountering various deities and challenges, bears a striking resemblance to later epic journeys through the underworld, such as those found in Homer's Odyssey or Virgil's Aeneid. While direct textual transmission is difficult to prove definitively, the thematic parallels suggest a shared human preoccupation with mortality and the unknown realms beyond. The story of Isis's unwavering devotion to resurrecting Osiris, her tireless search for his scattered body parts, is an archetype of enduring love and perseverance that echoes in countless tales of heroic quests and sacrificial love across cultures. Even in modern fantasy literature, elements like mummification, magical amulets, and divine pantheons often draw, consciously or unconsciously, from the rich tapestry of Egyptian mythology. One lesser-known influence lies in the very structure of storytelling itself. The cyclical nature of Egyptian myths. The daily birth and death of the sun, the annual flooding of the Nile bringing renewal, the endless cycle of Osiris's resurrection, embedded a profound sense of rhythm and repetition into their narratives. This cyclical understanding of time and existence, where creation and destruction are not endpoints but phases in an eternal process, can be seen as a precursor to narrative structures that emphasize recurrence and transformation, rather than purely linear progression. Perhaps the very idea of a hero's journey, with its descent into darkness and subsequent rebirth, owes something to the archetypal journey of the sun god through the night or the pharaoh through the underworld. However, historians still disagree whether the widespread adoption of specific Egyptian symbols in the early Christian era was a result of direct religious influence or merely an aesthetic appropriation of powerful, recognizable imagery. For example, the Ankh, the Egyptian symbol of life, occasionally appears in early Christian iconography, sometimes alongside the cross. Was this a syncretic blending of beliefs, an attempt to bridge pagan and Christian worldviews, or simply an instance of early Christians utilizing a familiar symbol of vitality in a new context? The debate highlights the complex interplay between cultural diffusion and independent innovation, making it challenging to draw definitive lines of influence. Some scholars argue for a more direct philosophical exchange, pointing to the presence of Egyptian mystery cults in the Roman Empire and the potential for shared esoteric knowledge. Others contend that the similarities are largely coincidental, arising from universal human experiences and symbolic associations. The enduring fascination with Egyptian mythology in the modern world extends beyond academic study or artistic inspiration. It permeates popular culture, from blockbuster films like the Mummy franchise to video games that immerse players in ancient Egyptian settings. These modern interpretations, while often taking liberties with historical accuracy for entertainment purposes, nevertheless keep the names of gods and pharaohs alive in the collective consciousness. The allure of hidden tombs, ancient curses, and powerful magic, all rooted in the mystique of Egypt, continues to fuel imaginations. Even the very concept of mystery, often associated with ancient Egypt, stems from the layers of meaning embedded in its hieroglyphs and rituals, which remained undeciphered for so long, inviting speculation and wonder. The practice of mummification, for example, though macabre to some, speaks to a profound human desire to transcend death, to preserve identity beyond the fleeting moment of life. This yearning for immortality, so central to Egyptian belief, resonates deeply with contemporary concerns about legacy and remembrance. The pyramids, those colossal monuments to eternity, continue to stand as silent witnesses to a civilization that dared to defy time, their sheer scale and precision inspiring awe and contemplation about human ingenuity and ambition. They are not merely tombs. They are architectural expressions of a complex cosmology, designed to facilitate the journey of the soul and ensure the eternal cycle of life. The concept of Ma'at, the cosmic principle of truth, justice, and balance, offers a timeless ethical framework that transcends its ancient origins. In a world often characterized by chaos and imbalance, the idea of striving for harmony, both individually and collectively, remains profoundly relevant. Ma'at was not just a goddess, but an active force that needed to be maintained through righteous action, a concept that speaks to personal responsibility and the interconnectedness of all things. This holistic worldview, where the divine, human, and natural realms were intricately intertwined, provides a rich philosophical wellspring for contemplation even today. Ultimately, the legacy of Egyptian mythology is not merely a collection of stories or a historical curiosity. It is a living testament to the human spirit's enduring quest for meaning, its grapple with mortality, and its yearning for connection with the divine. The tales of gods and goddesses, of creation and destruction, of love and loss, continue to echo through our collective consciousness, shaping our art, informing our literature, and inspiring our imaginations. The whispers of the Nile, carried on, the winds of time, remind us that even the most ancient beliefs can possess a timeless resonance, continuing to illuminate the human experience in unexpected and profound ways.